Anthony Richardson as a top 5 quarterback. Kyren Williams moving down in the running back rankings. This is not necessarily what Dave and Jamie have, but it is what our guest, Alfredo Brown of Football Guys, is going to be talking about today. Another awesome guest joining us. He's been on a live stream. He's been on the Dynasty show, but this is his first time on the FFT podcast. Welcome, Alfredo Brown at the Pretend GM. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little nervous. The live stuff, like, what if I have to get up and go to the bathroom? Do I just leave?
Just do what Adam does and just pee in your pants.
It'll warm you up a little bit. I don't know where you are, but it'll warm you up.
Oh, I'm right here in South Florida. I'm plenty warm.
That's right. I had a feeling. Dolphins Ricky Williams jersey behind you. So anyway, it's great to have you on. We're going to talk about a lot of your rankings, risers and fallers post NFL draft. We also did 2 rookie only mock drafts yesterday. We'll talk about the Superflex one if we have time and react to some of the rookies. And I drafted Malik Neighbors. Woohoo! So that was cool.
That's only because I'm not going to say somebody in front of you did something wrong.
Took a Dunze instead of Neighbors.
Yeah.
Why is that wrong? I remember somebody saying that they might take Odunze over Neighbors in their dynasty drafts anyway.
This is wrong.
Oh, okay.
I said that.
You would have done that? You would have taken Alfredo, you would have taken Odunze over Neighbors?
Yeah. I like Odunze's prospect profile better anyways, and I love that he's going to be tied to Caleb for years. We could be looking at another teardown of the Giants after this season if things don't go well with Daniel Jones. It's within the realm of possibility, man.
Could be a good thing for him, though.
Could be.
I mean, it's about as likely as Adam's softball career lasting 1 season.
Yeah, so
they asked you back.
Making fun of me all you want. I'm batting 1,000 right now in softball. So
you only had 1 at bat?
Yeah, it was a crazy game. It was a game of runs. Like we scored, we led 1-0 after the second inning, and then they scored the next 20 runs, and then they called it after the 5th inning before I got to bat for the second time. So yeah, yeah, 1 at bat.
Wow.
Alfred, this is a softball league where Adam knew nobody. He just got assigned to a team, so
they're not going to invite you.
They don't know what they were getting with Adam, but if you take one look at Adam, you know exactly what you're getting with Adam.
1 for 1. That's what you get.
That's what you got. I wonder if you'll ever get that second at bat.
No, I'm on the team. I have a shirt and everything. All right. News and notes.
20-1.
Yeah, I think it was 20-1. It was bad.
It's rough.
Wow. Yeah. News and notes. The Jaguars released Zay Jones. They saved more than $4 million on their salary cap. They're also going to bring in Jarvis Landry to participate in their rookie mini camp. But Dave, the release of Zay Jones, what does it mean for Brian Thomas and the rest of the crew?
It really doesn't mean a lot. I mean, this is a player who did average over 7 targets per game last year for Jacksonville. So in theory, you'd say, okay, they can just go and divvy that up amongst Kirk, Thomas, and Gabe Davis. But I said when they signed Gabe Davis, he's there to replace Zay Jones. And sure enough, that's what's going to happen. I don't think it's that big of a deal for anything.
Ravens, Raiders, nope. How about Chargers running back J.K. Dobbins? He says he's healthy, seems pretty motivated. Let's see how that plays out. Alfredo, who's your favorite Chargers running back right now?
Yuck. I guess it would be Gus Edwards by de facto because I don't know that J.K. Dobbins is going to be fully healthy, but I don't know that I'm going out of my way to draft any of them. If it's like a rookie draft or something, sure, Kamani Vidal, just for funsies.
Okay. And a few more news items here. Drew Lock is going to have a chance to compete for the Giants' starting quarterback job, according to Mike Garafolo. It's Daniel Jones's job for now, but Drew Lock could push him. The Falcons exercise Kyle Pitts' 5th-year option, and Philadelphia GM Howie Roseman says he does not intend, or the team does not intend to move rookie receiver Johnny Wilson to tight end. Please follow us on Spotify. It's a great way to listen to podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts on Spotify. So we're trying to grow our audience there. Go ahead and give us a follow. Also on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. Hit subscribe there. And let's get to some rankings, risers, and fallers from Alfredo. Anthony Richardson up 4 spots for you. He's now QB5. Was Adonai Mitchell the reason for this?
No, it's more so about just kind of looking back at what Anthony Richardson was doing last year when he was healthy. Quarterback 3 in points per game when he was starting. And we just know how much rushing matters for quarterbacks. And then I started to do my rankings, risers and fallers yesterday, and I was looking through it, and I was just like, quarterback gets really, really deep. There's potentially 18, maybe even 20 guys that you can draft. So if that happens, why not go for the guy that can win you your league? Shoot for the moon. Go get the guy who's could be a top 3, top 2 running back like Jalen Hurts was a few years ago. I get it. Some people are going to be really excited about CJ Stroud with Stephon Diggs and all these receivers, but CJ Stroud wasn't as great for fantasy as a lot of us remember. So we get into this point where, okay, the Colts added AD Mitchell. They got some offensive line depth in the middle rounds. I want to go for the guy with the massive upside in Anthony Richardson. So yeah, I've got him as a top 5 quarterback.
Alfredo, let me ask you, going by 6 points for passing touchdowns or 4?
No, that would be, so yeah, if we're doing that, I'm talking about 4 point per passing.
Right. So
yeah.
I think that always matters when we talk. We usually go by 6. So Richardson's not as high, at least for me. 4 points, he would be much higher.
Yeah. If we're talking 6, I'm probably putting him behind Burrow, Stroud, maybe even behind Kyler. That's where it starts to get messy.
Yep. Makes sense.
All right. Well, Jamie, if we're talking 4 point per passing touchdown leagues, would you have Anthony Richardson 5th behind Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson?
He would be right there. I'd have him over Stroud. I'd have him over Burrow. I'd have him over Dak. So yes, he would be probably 5 or 6.
Dave?
It's hard to say that you're going to take one of those other quarterbacks over Richardson when you know what he's capable of doing on the ground. He might score a rushing touchdown every single week. I think in 4 point, you'd have to put him that high.
Just want to see real quick where Joe Burrow, that was the one that really stood out to me. It's the toughest decision, obviously, where Burrow finished. He was QB4 in 2022 overall, and per game, he was also QB4, 21.5 points per game, but better than that when he had a healthy Higgins and Chase that season. All right, Kyler Murray up 2 spots. I'm going to skip him because that was a riser for Dave and Jamie as well. Bryce Young, we should talk about. Now you moved him up to 24, but still a guy that's worth discussing here. Some of the running backs you moved up: Saquon Barkley up 3 spots, Joe Mixon up 5 spots, Zamir White and Javonte Williams and Devin Singletary all moving up pretty significantly as well. So we'll get to that. But what do you want to say about Bryce Young? I mean, you talked about 18 to 20 quarterbacks who might be starting or comfortable starting. I guess he's not one of them. What do you think his upside is as they bring in Xavier Legette?
So yeah, you're right. He's not one of the guys I'm comfortable starting, but I would not be surprised if by week 3 or 4, he's one of those guys that we're picking up off the waiver wire, and a lot of people are streaming him week after week. It's, for me, the Dave Canales factor is so huge. Seeing what he's been able to do with Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, and I know we're kind of just beating a dead horse here, repeating the same stuff that everyone's been talking about, but the upgrade at both guard spots for the Panthers was big. They added Xavier Legette, like you mentioned, so they get another wide receiver. They get Jatavian Sanders, another tight end. They are obviously doing everything they can to build around their quarterback and make him comfortable, which is the exact opposite of what happened in year 1. He was uncomfortable, and he was just trying to play hero ball all the time.
You're forgetting about one of the biggest additions that they made, and that's Jonathan Brooks. Think back to Bryce Young at Alabama, where Jahmyr Gibbs was a primo target for him. And now they're giving him Brooks, who's a really good pass catcher. He's eventually going to get healthy. He'll make a difference for Bryce Young. I see them. You can tell me if you see it differently, Alfredo. I see the Panthers surrounding Bryce Young with short area targets. And I think they're going to focus on him getting the ball out quick, getting him on the move. And we know that Canales has earned the chops as being a good schemer in the passing game, getting his receivers open. So I think this is actually a guy that you don't necessarily prioritize in Superflex leagues, but you keep the name in mind if you find yourself waiting for your second quarterback as a guy that you could settle for and feel pretty good about.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. They're doing everything they can to make him comfortable, get him to get the ball out quickly, and just put playmakers in space. And when you hear Canales talking about Xavier Legette and how he's so versatile, they can use him out of the backfield, they can use him underneath on crossers. They want to get the ball out of Bryce Young's hands quick. So yeah, I'm in full agreement with you, Dave.
And one of the best Southern accents you'll ever hear.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So good.
And just a reminder, I think I brought this up on a show a couple of weeks ago. Bryce Young had a better passer rating as a rookie than Trevor Lawrence did. Lawrence then went for 4,100 yards, 25 touchdowns in his
season for Lawrence, the urban year or the real one?
The urban year. He had a better passer rating than a horrible Urban Meyer season for Trevor Lawrence, but new coach, new weapons, those types of things. It certainly helped Trevor Lawrence. It's funny, Xavier Legette, the way when we were drafting, doing the rookie draft yesterday, I kind of felt like Legette, I actually ended up drafting him at almost the same spot. We were doing 2 at a time. We're doing a rookie 1 QB and a rookie Superflex mock draft. I drafted him in the middle of the second round in both. And I just felt like he kind of was treated like a day 2 pick. You know, he went after Malachi Corley, Marshawn Lloyd, A.D. Mitchell, Jalen Wright. He went, and that was in the 1 QB league. In the Superflex league, he went after Trey Benson, Michael Penix, couple, guys like Lad McConkey and Brian Thomas and Keon Coleman. I get that, but I don't know. Didn't feel like there was a lot of respect, Jamie, for Xavier.
I'll tell you, I just drafted him in a real rookie draft, Superflex draft with other analysts, and it was pick 205, so in the same range. It was, I was debating, I was hoping I was like 1 spot away from Pearsall, who I like a little bit better, just long term. But it was those same receivers that you mentioned, the running backs again. And I think with any rookie draft, obviously it comes down to need, because you're filling in spots not necessarily always taking best prospect. And in the case of what the mock drafts we're doing, we're taking most likely just best prospect. But yes, it does feel like he's getting overlooked a little bit. And like I know I was looking at Heath's rankings, for example, and I don't want to pick on Heath because he's not here, but like he has Malachi Corley ahead of Xavier Legette. Like I don't necessarily see a huge difference there from the type of player that they can be, because I think they're going to do some similar things. But you're also talking about a situation where, and just going back to the Panthers, Legette could end up being the best receiver for the Panthers. Deontay Johnson should be that guy, and Adam Thielen probably going to hang on this year to be second in targets. It'd be surprising if it's a huge dramatic shift away from him that much. But Johnson's not tied there long term, and if Legette picks up from where he left off, it's hard for a guy in his year 5 season in college to all of a sudden flash and say, okay, this is the type of player he is. So there's some concerns, clearly. But he could easily be the go-to option in this offense for Dave Canales this year and for the next couple of years. So he does feel like he's getting overlooked a little bit. And you always have to look at it. We talk about draft capital a lot. The Panthers not only targeted this guy, they traded back into the first round to get this guy. So there's clearly a want to use him and use him in a big way.
All right, we got to take a break here. We'll come back, talk about Saquon Barkley moving up, going ahead of Kyren Williams, who's a big faller in the rankings. That's interesting. This is for Alfredo Brown. Sit tight, everybody. We'll be right back after this.
Europa League semi-finals on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount Plus. You were made for this.
Welcome back. Alfredo Brown of Football Guys joining us here. Getting a lot
Alfredo, if you didn't know, by the way, Adam actually does the voiceover for the commercials too. He just changes his voice and does that quickly, so it's pretty cool.
I mean, that's impressive. That's an incredible skill.
Made for this.
It's identical.
You move Saquon Barkley up. He's RB6. You move Kyren Williams down. He's now RB10. That's a 6-spot drop for Kyren Williams. Tell me about those two guys. Why you move Barkley ahead of Kyren?
Yeah, I mean, for Barkley, I was already kind of moving him up a little bit and wanted to see what happened with the NFL draft. And we already know the Eagles have a great O-line. They're going to be in scoring position quite often. A little bit of this is Barkley, and a little bit of this is guys moving down like Kyren and Jacobs and Achane and those players dropping. To me, there's not a whole lot of difference between Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor at this point, who are both my RB 5 and 6. For me, it's just Saquon's got the good offense. He's got the talent. We have not seen a whole lot of that with the Giants over the years. I know he's probably not going to catch as many passes, but I don't think the Eagles go out and sign a guy like Saquon and be like, okay, let's keep running that tush push. Let's not really use you. Let's bring in Kenneth Gainwell. This is going to be Saquon's backfield. At least that's what I believe. And then for Kyren, it's so much of just Blake Corum being drafted and taking away those touchdown opportunities. Kyren had 12 touchdowns last year. That's kind of what Blake Corum does. He's good around the goal line. And I know Sean McVay said these guys have similar skill sets. I don't necessarily believe that to be totally true. They look similar if you were to look at them side by side, but Corum is more of like the banger in the middle. He's going to get the goal line tough work, and Kyren's going to be a little bit more of the passing downs guy. So I do think this kind of becomes something where they're working in tandem. Plus, we see the Rams have a new leading rusher once every year for the last 5 seasons. So I wouldn't be surprised if midway through the season, Blake Corum is now the new running back that everyone's picking up off waivers.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty interesting take. I feel like Sean McVay said that Kyren Williams was going to be pretty involved as a rookie. I remember those early reports. I think, no, he said that. He had 35 carries.
He's always said that he wants to get 2 guys involved. and then it kind of doesn't happen, or one guy just completely replaces the other guy.
Right. We did see it that one year. We had Akers, Henderson, and who was the other guy? I can't remember. They were using three of them. Maybe
Sony Michel.
Sony Michel. I don't know. It was Akers' rookie season.
I think it was Sony.
Yeah.
And so it's right. But I do think he probably wants to settle on one guy if he has that one guy. Henderson
had it with Gurley.
He certainly had it with Gurley. I think he kind of even had it with Henderson for about half a season before Henderson got hurt, and then Royce Freeman came in. It was a couple years ago. But yeah, so
you're mixing your running backs now.
Was
Freeman was the last year joint.
Okay, Freeman was he?
Yeah, I don't think Freeman was with the Rams before 23.
He's with the Broncos
and Texans.
Yeah. Who the hell was I thinking of in 2020?
I think Michel's the guy.
Michelle.
Could have been Sony.
Yeah.
No, all right. Anyway, you think Alfredo thinks that the rookie running back Blake Corum is going to be a factor? Dave, Jamie, do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a factor. To what extent, we'll find out. You go back to before Kyren got hurt in the middle of the season, they were talking about giving Ronnie Rivers some more work. And look, Kyren came into the league more as a pass catching prospect and, proved to be a featured guy last year. And it was fun to watch. Clearly, he was amazing for fantasy. I'm sure they don't want to overwork them. They have playoff aspirations, as they showed us last year. So to not have a guy wear down that may not be able to handle that type of workload, it just makes some sense. And Blake Corum was a cheap enough prospect where they took him that he can add to this backfield and add to this roster. Is he going to detract enough from Kyren Williams that you should significantly drop him? I mean, look, they're back-to-back for me. I don't have a problem if somebody wants to take Barkley over Kyren. That's 6 and 7 in my rankings. So, Barkley's situation improved dramatically. The competition behind him, Kenneth Gainwell and now Will Shipley, those don't scream like guys are going to take him off the field significantly. Like Alfredo said, the offense is going to have a little bit of a shift. The center's not there. Is the tush push going to be the same? Are they going to do it as much? They're going to have as much confidence in doing it? I don't know. We'll find out what the system, the coaching staff, how everything changes, because it's a significant upgrade. I will say this. The Rams have an away game against the Jets, so that's a touchdown coming for Boston Scott, who they just signed yesterday as well. He doesn't get to play the Giants, but he still gets to play in that stadium. So Boston Scott will score against the Jets. That's
Giants thing. It's a Giants thing.
Yeah,
not a stadium thing. By the way, Dave, what I had mixed up, it was 2021. Okay. The first 10 games of the season, Darrell Henderson was number 14 running back per game. He averaged 14.2 carries per game. Sony Michel averaged 6 carries per game. And then Henderson got hurt. Could you see a split like that? 14 for Kyren, 6 for Corum?
Definitely. But I could also see what Alfredo said, or one of Alfredo or Jamie, or maybe both of them said it, where Corum does take over at some point. And so, like, the thoughts that where I'm at right now is I feel like Barkley's safer. What are the odds that he's actually going to lose carries to another running back? It seems pretty low. Will he lose goal line carries to Jalen Hurts? Definitely. But Alfredo said it. Kyren had 12 rushing touchdowns. I think he had 15 total last year. Hard to believe that he can do that again. Now they're adding Corum, and the things that they talked about in the post-draft press conference with Corum, they seem to like him as a pass blocker. They seem to like him as a potential 4-minute back, a closeout running back, someone that can grind at the end of the game. In short yardage, I'm just now starting to look into this. Kyren only converted 2 of 5 carries inside the 5 for touchdowns last year. So it's definitely not as safe for Kyren as it is for Saquon Barkley. You can't shrug off Blake Corum. If you draft Kyren Williams, I think the smartest thing you could do is spend the draft capital necessary to get Blake Corum in your same draft. But there's going to be at least half your league also looking at Blake Corum with a pick between round 8 and the end and saying, I got to get this guy because he could end up being the best running back on the Rams. That's the type of investment that I think you have to make if you end up making Kyren a top 12 to 15 pick on your squad.
Well, if you're inclined to handcuff running backs, I mean,
if you are, but if you're drafting Kyren Williams, you're drafting him because he's a Rams running back. You figure he can be the lead back. Safeguarding that spot on that team seems to be a good idea.
Sure, but you could also, if you're torn, take Barkley and then take Corum, and then you have maybe both.
Yes, absolutely, you could do that too.
Yep.
I have brought this up as well, but just comparing opportunities in the Giants offense versus opportunities for running backs in the Eagles offense. If you're someone who's thinking, well, yeah, it's going to be a lot of Jalen Hurts is going to steal all the touchdowns. Well, even if Jalen Hurts does do that, the Eagles, I won't give you the specifics and the numbers. The Eagles still have been producing more running back carries inside the 5-yard line than the Giants have been. Or at least for like comparing the Eagles running backs to Barkley over the last 3 seasons. The Eagles running backs are getting a lot more opportunities than Saquon Barkley had been getting for the Giants. So it's still, even with Jalen Hurts, looks like a much better situation to score touchdowns. All right, Joe Mixon up to RB13. That's a 5-spot jump for you, Alfredo.
Yeah, for me, it's so much of this is not just what happened for these running backs in the draft, but what happened to other guys throughout the draft and what made them fall. For me, you see the Texans, they go out and they draft starting right tackle. We know that they already had a really good passing game to open up the field, but it gets even better adding Stephon Diggs. You get one more year of development for CJ Stroud. This offense is kind of always going to be in scoring position. And so it's really just kind of a lateral move for Joe Mixon to go from Cincinnati to Houston in a sort of scoring offense type of way. But then you see the Texans, they didn't draft another running back. They weren't trying to supplant or have another guy there. They didn't draft anyone until the 6th round. And I look at it this way. Last year, Devin Singletary, for those final 8 weeks, when he took over, he was a running back 16 in points per game. Joe Mixon, to me, is running back. This offense should be even better and potentially give even more scoring opportunities. That puts Joe Mixon firmly in that RB2 category for me. And looking at my rankings, like he's right there just underneath guys like Josh Jacobs, Rashad White, Devon Achane. Like he's in that same realm as guys like James Cook and a bunch of them, because I think they have some pretty uneasy situations too, but he is the clear-cut running back in a good offense. I'll take that.
Follow up here. Do you see a big difference between the threat of Blake Corum to Kyren Williams and the threat of Bucky Irving to Rashad White, who you just mentioned?
I don't think Bucky Irving is as scary for Rashad White. I do think the one thing that bothers me just a little bit is that Bucky Irving is such a pass-catching back, and that's what he was really good at. That might have a lot more to do with Bo Nix than it does actually Bucky Irving, but we know that skill set is in his wheelhouse. So you maybe get a few passes taken away from Rashad White, but it's not nearly as scary as Blake Corum for Kyren Williams.
All right, next 2 running backs here. Zamir White at RB22 and Javonte Williams at RB23, both big risers for you. So you have White 1 spot ahead of Javonte. Dave, then Jamie. Who do you guys like better, Zamir White or Javonte Williams?
Zamir. I can't really, to be honest, figure out the Javonte Williams situation. I mean, they added another running back to this backfield. And if you go back to last year and Sean Payton, it almost felt like, oh, yeah, we have Javonte Williams. Like like he inherited him as opposed to, coveted him. And is he going to be all the way back from his ACL tear? He certainly played much better, I think, certainly than I expected last year in terms of staying healthy, being involved in the passing game. This could be one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And now you have maybe a guy who's going to be goal line back there. So, like, Javonte didn't really move for me. I can't really justify moving him up very much. And I don't want to drop him because I think he's still the best running back in Denver. But as long as they still have all 4 guys on the roster, it feels like they all have the potential to have some sort of a role. And that's what scares me a lot about him. So Zamir for me, easy. Javonte is not somebody that I'm very excited about.
He's not even a real good settle for RB2, but that's kind of what you're going to classify him as. And so if you're drafting 0 RB, hero RB, you get to, I'm not sure exactly where I have him ranked, but I think he's in that round 5-6 range. You get to that point in your draft. Actually, I have him just outside of round 6. So early round 7. This is the type of running back that you take to just get you off to a decent start of the season, Javonte Williams. Sean Payton did talk about Estime as a 1st and 2nd down back.
Which is
I
terrifying.
wonder, though, if he's just going to begin the year as the backup to Javonte. And if Javonte gets hurt or if he really underwhelms, then they let Estime get a shot at it. He's also one of the running backs that I felt like got drafted so that he could potentially play on special teams and be a kick returner under the new NFL rules. I think he'd be good in that role, Estime would, whereas Williams is going to be the incumbent for the running back job. So I don't love him either, but he is going to have a role at least at the beginning of the year. And if he stays healthy and hangs on, he'll be relatively productive over the course of the season.
I'll just go back to it. 3 guys came in with Sean Payton in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Whatever you think of them. And again, I think Javonte's the best of the group. But Samaje Piran's the guy they signed. Jaleel McLaughlin's the guy they took off the scrap heap, undrafted free agent. And now they go and they draft estimate. And we know he's been able to, make pretty good production out of guys that we don't always expect. So I just wonder where Javonte fits in if he does not have that second year bounce back off the ACL, which he could. I mean, he's the most talented of the group. There's no doubt about it. But it just feels a little crowded. I would like to see one guy
behind Najee. I've got him behind Zach Moss. I've got him behind Jonathan Brooks. So a guy who's recovering from an ACL tear. I've got him behind Connor, and I've got him behind Zamir White, who I have ahead of everybody that I just named. I'm really encouraged by Zamir White's situation in Vegas now.
All right, Alfredo, make the case for Javonte Williams as RB23.
So for me, I know we talked a little bit about Audric Estime here. A guy getting drafted in the 5th round and then immediately being said he's got a good 2-down skill set doesn't worry me as much. I think, Dave, you hit the nail on the head. He's more of the backup if Javonte is not able to go or gets hurt, and he's kind of the thunder to Jaleel McLaughlin's lightning. Samaje Perine, there's a lot of projection going on here to this ranking, right? But Samaje Perine, the Broncos saved $3 million cap by cutting him. So drafting Estime, having McLaughlin on the team, drafting or picking up Blake Watson, there's also a pretty good shot that Samaje Perine's not on the roster. I get it. There's a little uncertainty here with Sean Payton, but what really kind of pushed it up a little bit more for me was Bo Nix. And he's a guy that just checks down a ton. He had the 3rd lowest depth of target in college football last year. 30% of his passes were behind the line of scrimmage. This is a guy who does not really sit there and make all the reads. He wants to get the ball out quick. And we saw even for a little bit of time with Russ, Javonte Williams can catch the ball. So I look at Javonte Williams, and I do have him behind Zamir White, like you said, but I look at Javonte and Najee, and I say, okay, that situation is probably going to be super frustrating with the Steelers. Tony Pollard, frustrating. Brian Robinson, frustrating. There's a lot of guys where it could be frustrating, so let me go for the guy that I think has the best opportunity to be the top running back in his offense.
And the Broncos led the NFL in running back targets last season with 153, and then they draft Bo Nix, who seems, as Alfredo said, to fit in with that philosophy. Let's go to some wide receivers here. Wide receiver 13, Chris Olave. He's up 2 spots. T. Higgins is at wide receiver 22. He's up 3 spots. Zay Flowers up 4 spots to wide receiver 25. So Olave at wide receiver 13, Higgins at 22, Flowers at 25. These are all rankings risers. As we kind of incorporate the rookies here, I'm assuming you have Harrison over Olave. You can tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah. And then do you have any rookies ahead of Higgins or Flowers? Any other rookies?
I do not. I have Neighbors and Adunze behind those 2 players.
Okay. So why are Olave, Higgins, and Flowers risers for you?
For all 3 of them, it's what they didn't do, and they did not go after wide receivers early, or the Bengals did not trade T. Higgins away. I know the Bengals did go and get Jermaine Burton, but that's probably just sliding into the Tyler Boyd role or taking over for T. Higgins after the year. But I love that Higgins is in the contract year. Chris Olave, the Saints lose Michael Thomas. They don't really go out and get another wide receiver or another pass catching option. They get Bub Means in the 5th round. Cool. They upgrade the offensive line with Talise Fuaga, giving Derek Carr a little bit more time. Chris Olave, he kind of burned me a little bit last year, but I'm still willing to draft him where he's going because he can be the top target on this offense and continue to be that number 1 guy and develop a little bit more chemistry with Derek Carr. And then with Higgins, just to go back to him really quick, there's a lot of recency bias of what happened last year. I think for the Bengals, we got to throw out last year. Last year was an absolute nightmare. They started off terrible. Then Burrow gets hurt. Then they're dealing with Jake Browning. And then Higgins is hurt. And then it's just one thing led to another. And it was just a disaster of a year. So I'm willing to take the mulligan on T. Higgins. And then lastly was Zay Flowers. The Ravens didn't go and draft any other wide receivers until round 4, Devontae Walker, who I think he needs a lot of development. He struggles with routes. He struggles with play strength. This is not a guy who's going to be challenging the other starters for snaps. The Ravens really seem comfortable with giving Rashad Bateman more work. And if that's the case, we kind of already saw what happens with Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. Zay Flowers becomes the number 1 guy. So they're banking on that. I'm not. I do think that Zay Flowers still gets to be the top wide receiver in a very good offense.
Would you draft Chris Olave? And by the way, Alfredo's going to join us for our mock draft today, this afternoon, which we'll be breaking down tomorrow. And I cannot wait to do this draft. Would you draft Olave or Michael Pittman?
I have Olave one spot ahead of Pittman Jr.
Okay. How about Olave or Mike Evans?
Well, I've got Evans 2 spots behind Chris Olave. So it's Olave, Pittman, Evans. You're asking the right questions.
Okay, good. Let's talk about your tight ends on the move. Dalton Kincaid up to tight end 5. That's a 2-spot rise for Kincaid. And Jake Ferguson up to tight end 9, up 3 spots there. Jamie, any qualms with Kincaid at tight end 5 or Ferguson at tight end 9?
Kincaid's been my tight end 5 all offseason. So, very excited about the opportunity and outlook for him, especially with what Buffalo's receiving core looks like. We talk all the time about being first or second on your team in targets at that position. And he may be first, just based on how this receiving core is shaking out. So there's a lot to love about Kincaid's scenario. And we spent a lot of time this offseason already saying that, when it was Knox missing or at the end of the season, Gabe Davis missing, it just was his targets increased, his target percentage increased. And that's a guy I think Josh Allen will definitely lean on. And Sean McDermott already said, he wasn't just talking about his wide receiver room. He was incorporating his wide receiver and tight end room into one. And I think that makes a lot of sense given this offense. For Ferguson, he's tight end 10 for me. So, I have him right behind, or might be tight end 11 now that Bauer's in there, but I have him right behind Njoku. And I'd have no problem taking him over Njoku based on what we saw from Njoku with Deshaun Watson. So Ferguson, I'm sure Alfredo is probably going to say, they didn't do anything to this receiving core. In fact, they lost the guy in Michael Gallup. And so you kind of know what you're getting. It's the Jason Witten to Dalton Schultz to Jake Ferguson. It's almost rinse, wash, repeat with what Dak Prescott does with that position. It's basically 100 to 110 targets per season. It's going to be 6 to 8 touchdowns. It's going to be in the neighborhood of 65 to 75 catches, and Ferguson just feels safe, so not somebody I think that has tremendous upside unless, of course, something changes in this offense, but you just know what you're getting. So very good. Settle for tight end, great or late. He's a great late option. And so there's a good feeling if you have to wait on tight end, and this is the guy you settle for. Again, not a difference maker, but a very safe starter.
Cool. Dave, Jake Ferguson had 10 catches, 93 yards, and 3 touchdowns in one playoff game. That was cool. But how do you think, first for you, Dave,
Let's
and then I'll
project off that for 2024.
Well, you wonder if it had been part of his final line, right? If he had 8 touchdowns instead of 5 and 850 yards, how people would view him. But
I don't think anybody remembered that game until you brought it up.
I know, but should they? Probably not. I'm not gonna.
No,
it was a crazy.
Project him for 51 touchdowns,
Dave. Obviously, that's not what I meant. I'm just saying,
yes, it is. That's exactly what you meant.
But he did it. He did it. And people drafted Gabe Davis off a 4-touchdown, 200-yard game, with that game in mind. But I think that this Ferguson performance in the playoffs is completely forgotten about. Crazy game. They got behind big to Green Bay. Anywho, the fact that they don't have a running game right now, does it help, hurt, or not matter at all for Ferguson?
It's not just that they don't have a running game that you like. It's that they don't have a number 2 wide receiver that you like. So there's a real opportunity here for Ferg to be number 2 on the Cowboys in targets. I hate where we're at right now because I was stealing him in our mock drafts before the draft, getting him in mid to late round 10, if not round 11. I love that value, but I hate it even more with what's going on with Kincaid and Buffalo. I don't know how many people are buying Keon Coleman to go in there and be the top target getter right away. I think Kincaid can absolutely do that. He could get maybe even 130 targets, really could be that number 1 guy for Josh Allen and a real difference maker in fantasy. His ADP in 3 PPR drafts that we did before the NFL draft was 80.7. That's round 7. I would be shocked if he's a round 7 pick in our mock today with Alfredo. I agree that he's top 5 in PPR. I think he's top 4 in non-PPR. I think the spot to get him is right on that fence between rounds 5 and 6. I don't mind going after Kincaid then because I think he can be a fantasy monster.
Anything you want to add, Alfredo?
These guys really covered it all. I think that the ceiling for Kincaid is really, really high. We just need to see kind of that touchdown variation over those final 11 weeks of the season. Kincaid and Sam Laporta had identical metrics across the board.
I'd like to see a quick poll amongst everybody on the show. Jamie, Alfredo, Adam, do you think Kincaid can finish top 3? Is that in his ceiling for fantasy and PPR?
Of course.
Yes.
Do you think he can finish top 1?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think it would be
a guy we're drafting nowhere close to his ceiling then. And that's beautiful. That's the type of guy I want to draft.
I think it would. I don't think it would be like an 18 points per game type of season. I think it would have to be kind of like not a great tight end.
Like last year.
We don't have, like last year. We don't have a truly elite tight end. I don't know if you guys agree. I don't see Kincaid having an elite tight end season.
It would have to be 15 touchdowns.
He averaged almost 14 PPR points per game, weeks 8 through 12. There was no Dawson Knox then. I think what you're hoping for is he takes that leap where it doesn't matter if Knox is on the field or not.
Yeah, I would hope so. All right.
That's what you're looking for.
Let's take a break here. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll look at some rankings fallers, try to save some time for that Superflex rookie-only mock draft. James Cook is a faller. Interesting. Let's talk about that when we come back on Fantasy Football Today.
From the world of Sonic the Hedgehog, is there anyone stronger?
No.
Tougher?
No.
Hungrier?
Grapes was an interesting choice for someone who doesn't use fingers.
Knuckles, now streaming only on Paramount Plus.
Now streaming only on Paramount Plus. It's Fantasy Football Today. We are also on Paramount Plus, but not only on Paramount Plus.
No.
I was thinking. I was like, why is someone saying no? But now I get it. All right, so fallers in Alfredo's rankings here. Kyren Williams, who we discussed, he's RB10. Josh Jacobs down to RB12. He's down 4 spots. And James Cook down 4 spots to RB16. So let's talk about those two guys, Josh Jacobs and James Cook, Alfredo.
So much of their value was going to be predicated on volume. And that's what it was. Josh Jacobs, he was super inefficient last year in Las Vegas, but hey, he's getting volume. And then when the Packers sign him and they cut Aaron Jones, we're saying, okay, cool, volume. They sign A.J. Dillon. Okay, cool. He's still going to get volume because A.J. Dillon's not that great. But then they go and they draft Marshawn Lloyd. And Marshawn Lloyd's a guy that I liked a lot. He was one of my top 3 running backs in the draft. And he's a guy that's got that explosive playability. He can be used in the receiving game. They've already talked about using him in the receiving game quite a bit. And we know that LaFleur likes to use 2 running backs and maybe even 3 if A.J. Dillon does get a carry or 2 here and there. So Josh Jacobs, it's not like I hate Josh Jacobs. He's still RB12 for me. He's that low end RB1, but the volume not being there kind of stinks going forward.
I agree.
Are you comfortable with him in the second round, Josh Jacobs?
Probably not. If he slides to the 3rd, I'd be more comfortable. I don't want Josh Jacobs to be the 2nd best player on my fantasy team.
Who are some backs you've got ranked ahead of Jacobs?
Over Jacobs, I've got Ken Walker, Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, and then it just keeps going up the list to Kyren, ETN, Barkley, those guys.
Ken Walker. That's higher than you guys have Ken Walker, right?
They're almost back to back for me with Jacobs still slightly ahead. But yes, I wouldn't draft Walker ahead of him, but I certainly agree with Alfredo that Jacobs was a loser coming out of the draft.
I agree too, and yet I still have him ranked fairly high, certainly as a 2nd round pick. Call me skeptical that Marshawn Lloyd's going to go in there and take a lot of work away from Jacobs. I love this offense in Green Bay. Fingers crossed that they keep it all together and that Jacobs has the opportunity to do at least get the workload that Aaron Jones had in the postseason. Not necessarily the numbers that Aaron Jones had in the postseason, because that was preposterous, but still having that chance all season long to just be the lead 1A running back in that offense. I think he could be very productive. That's somebody that I want to get a piece of.
Yeah. So why Ken Walker? I mean, Ken Walker's got competition, doesn't he? And I think he catches fewer passes this year than Josh Jacobs. Why do you not have the same concerns about Ken Walker?
Just flat out, Ken Walker, I think, is just a better football player than Josh Jacobs. He's going to provide a lot more explosive plays. Like I said, the efficiency for Jacobs was absolutely terrible. And we didn't really, I think we all had the fear of Zach Charbonnet coming in and taking a lot of work from Walker. That didn't happen. I know that can change going into year 2. We've got a new offensive coordinator, but I also think that with the Seahawks doing a lot more downfield stuff, that's going to open things up a lot more for the Seahawks in running game. So for Ken Walker, those plays that maybe weren't the big breakout running plays, I think we get a little bit more of that, like what we saw in his rookie season. And I just prefer Ken Walker in that aspect because I think he's a better football player.
Okay. So I was just thinking, as you were talking about Dalton Kincaid being on the rise, I'm just kind of thinking to myself, like, man, they don't really have a great receiving core here unless Keon Coleman has a terrific rookie season. If the Bills are going to be really good offensively this year, I feel like James Cook is going to have to be a huge part of that. And then I see him on your fallers list here. So maybe you don't agree. The other thing about Cook is he could be really good in real life and just not score a lot of touchdowns and not be that good in fantasy. So I get that. But down to RB16 for you. So why the drop for James Cook?
I think while we're kind of like it's the magician thing, while we're all looking over here at what's happening for Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman, I think we missed, or we're just forgetting what happened with Curtis Samuel being on that team. And I think that there's a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram of what Curtis Samuel does and what James Cook does. And we know that Curtis Samuel had one of his best seasons of his career under Joe Brady. So not surprised if Curtis Samuel's getting a bunch of targets out of the backfield, and that not necessarily limits James Cook, but takes a few targets away from him. And then one of my favorite guys, the running back spot, who Dave and I have talked about quite a bit, is Ray Davis. And I think he's very underrated. He was, I think, my running back 5 or 6 in this class. And I get it. He's like 34 years old. Cool. He just needs to be good right now on his first contract in the NFL. And I think he can absolutely do that. He's got a 3-down skill set. I know he was Daniel Jeremiah's running back 3, which surprised a lot of people, but he's got the 3-down skill set, and he fits the mold of what the Bills have been trying to get for years. A running back that can work the goal line and also work in tandem with James Cook. They tried to do that with Damian Harris, and then the injury derailed all of that.
They've tried it with a lot of guys.
Yeah, they really have. They really have. And it's like everybody except the guy we want. Usually, or it's like some Latavius Murray, Damian Harris, Leonard Fournette, Frank Gore, Zach Moss, right? They always do try it. So, I love James Cook. The guy is so good, right? You got to like him as a player, right? Because I know you didn't seem so thrilled about Josh Jacobs, but I don't think you have efficiency concerns with James Cook.
No, James Cook, there's a lot of explosive plays there. I think just what worries me is there's going to be times where maybe we would have seen more of these explosive plays in like the passing game or near the goal line, where he might not be out there as much. Ray Davis is also a really good pass blocker. That's one of the things. There's a clip going around on Twitter of, I think it's Brandon Bean or one of the guys from the Bills front office, that he talks about that's the play he keeps watching of Ray Davis, where he just absolutely unloads on a blitzer. And I get it. Josh Allen is able to escape the pass rush, but the little things like that get running backs in the field. And when I see a pathway for a rookie to get onto the field, it just ends up hurting that veteran just a little bit. So I don't hate James Cook. He's still my running back 16. I think he's got some great upside in the passing game, but he just moves down a little bit for me.
I'm going to skip some of the names on your list. You have James Conner as a faller, but definitely want to talk about Raheem Mostert down 4 spots. Before I do that, I did want to mention my favorite Venn diagram, because there's a lot of Venn diagrams going around, and you mentioned it. I don't know if you've seen this one. It's the "you guys ready to rock and roll" Venn diagram. Have you seen that one?
I have not, but that sounds like a dadism of some sort. Yes.
So the left side is lead singers at concerts, and the other is dad leaving a restaurant.
Spot on.
I love that one. All right, so Raheem Mostert down 4 spots. Did you move Achane down? And what do you think about the Dolphins' backfield? This is one we talked about a lot with Jalen Wright coming aboard.
Yeah, I moved them both down just a little bit. And Raheem Mostert was really fun last season, but he's not a guy that I want to rely on as one of my top 2 running backs on my fantasy team. I also moved down Devon Achane. Let's go with the Venn diagram thing again. There's just so much overlap when you get all 3 of these guys into a room together. Hearing Mike McDaniel say there's going to be competition is never something you really want to hear. I do think Mostert and Achane probably get the majority of the early reps, and Wright gets brought along little by little, but Mostert missed time last season, and Achane missed time last season, and Jalen Wright, my exact draft comp for him was Raheem Mostert. So to me, it speaks volume that a team like the Dolphins that had needs in the secondary and defensive line and offensive line, they traded up to go get a running back when they already had 2. It's like, why do we need to go? Why did we draft Raheem Mostert when we have Raheem Mostert at home? Well, they did it anyways, and they traded up to go do it. So to me, like, that just speaks a lot about the usage that he could be getting in this season.
And by the way, Alfredo does such a great job studying these running backs in the offseason. So when he gives you a comp and tells you, about rookie running backs, definitely someone that you want to be paying attention to. I know I certainly do. So where do you have Achane? You have Mostert at RB29. Where do you have Achane?
This is going to be a little spicy. I've got Achane at running back 15 right now, behind Joe Mixon.
Dave, is that spicy?
No.
Oh, good.
Not spicy at all. Might be spicy for others. I've got Achane even further down just because I'm so standoffish on this running back group. If I could draft a team running back, maybe the Dolphins would be top 3. But I'm worried about Achane ever being a lead running back when last year, how often was he the lead back? I know that there were games where he had a lot of carries and more carries than Mostert. A lot of those games were blowouts. How many blowouts are the Dolphins going to be in this year? Either way, makes me a little bit nervous to take him. I'm probably going to let other people take Achane.
Dave, Jamie, is Achane higher than 15th for you?
No, he's lower, but just not far behind. It's the same thing. It's a lot of mouths to feed in an offense that has a lot of weapons. There's only one ball to go around, So I think Achane is still my favorite. He is still my favorite Dolphins running back. I just wonder how this split's going to work, and how much they're going to rely on all three of these guys. It still feels like from what last year, at least how last year unfolded, that Mostert will be the reliable of the three, but he's going to be 32. How much more can he hold up in that regard? And you have these two Lamborghinis, that need to get fed as well. And how Mike McDaniel wants to, just create mismatches and use that speed as much as he can. So I think it's going to be frustrating at times for all of these guys. I think there's going to be amazing stretches of seasons for each of these guys individually, hopefully more so for Achane and Mostert based on how people will be drafting them. But you also got to think that this was a move for the future too. This was a move to replace Raheem Mostert. It could happen this year. Most likely it happens next year. And then we see this Dolphins backfield with Achane and Wright for many years to come.
Jamie, did you hear McDaniel's comment about how it's going to be a fierce competition and take that to mean more like the back of the running back depth chart rather than the front of the running back depth chart?
No, I think that he's going to allow these guys to all fight for, who's going to get on the field. And rightfully so. Okay. I mean, Achane showed he has the ceiling to be the best running back in football. That Denver game certainly speaks to that. Mostert led the NFL in rushing touchdowns, tied for the lead in total touchdowns. He's got a proven track record in this system with this coach. And Jalen Wright, while you can nitpick how he got his production with a lot of light boxes at Tennessee, he certainly has the speed that the Dolphins covet, so he could be a special teams guy also. This could certainly be a move to, get a guy on the field that, just needs a tiny little sliver of a hole and he's gone, for a lot of special teams production too. So that could be part of this as well.
And there's going to be a lot of light boxes in Miami too. This is a really good fit for him. It's probably the best team fit for him going from college to the pros.
Here's my problem with all of this. It's like, I agree. I mean, you've made so many good points, but I'm just go back to last year. You had Bijan and Gibbs drafted in the first round. I'm just going to read the rest of the running backs. And did they have any impact on the incumbent? Zach Charbonnet. Yes, I would say he did. He took Walker off the field in 2-minute drills. He was the pass catching guy, but that probably would have been someone else other than Walker regardless. But Walker still had a fine year. Third round, Kendry Miller did not impact Kamara at all. Tajay Spears had himself a nice year, but did not impact Derrick Henry at all. Derrick Henry was not a pass catcher anyway. He wasn't getting 50 catches.
Right. That's another situation where somebody.
If you're going to say Charbonnet impacted Walker, Spears impacted Henry.
Right. It was the same type of impact, but not one that was surprising to us.
Fine, but not one that really impacted their fantasy value, though. I mean, those guys had their opportunities, right?
Right. I don't think we were looking at Walker or Henry as 3-down dominators.
Well, then none of these guys are going to do it. Even Achane.
Achane obviously was great, but was Tank Bigsby? No. And now those were round 3 picks. Round 4, Roshan Johnson. Yeah, because they didn't really have a great running back. I mean, they didn't really have like a guy. Right. I just feel like it's very possible that these rookies are just not going to matter that much. I mean, the incumbents, I think, are going to have if they blow it, that's another story. But that's what would worry me for Josh Jacobs if he gets off.
I think when it comes down to where the position is from an NFL perspective, you almost have to throw out draft value because there was not going to be a lot of guys that were going to be drafted high. Brooks may have gone a few spots higher if his ACL was intact. Maybe the Cowboys would have actually bought in on him, and the hype was there. But in any event, I think when you just look at it, so when we say 5th round pick for this guy or 3rd round pick for that guy, it's not really the case like it used to be anymore of where these guys were getting selected.
I don't agree. I think there's a pretty clear correlation that guys taken on day 3 just aren't very good. And
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying where these guys are being drafted was the same thing the case 2 years ago. I'm saying this being naive.
I'll look it up.
that they didn't have much impact. But you know what I was getting at is free agency was much different this year for that position, because I think people looked at the draft and said there's not a lot of special talents that are going to help us change. So Baltimore goes and spends for Derrick Henry, and you know the Texans go and trade for Joe Mixon, and the Vikings jump on Aaron Jones the minute he's set free. You know, there's a lot of just, you know, following the domino effect of how this all unfolded. And really, you look at it, there was one team, at least unless I'm off here, one team that said they drafted a starter, and that's the Panthers, which had a failed experiment last year in free agency, and a guy that's just a guy in Chuba Hubbard. You know, I don't think the Cardinals drafted Trey Benson to be their starter. He might be their eventual starter, but he's not starting this year. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of these scenarios where these guys are just guys, you know. So it's funny, like, you know, and Alfredo, I think, brought up something which we're all victim of, where, you know, you said Blake Corum's going to impact Kyren Williams, but Zach Charbonnet didn't impact Ken Walker. They almost feel like, you know, again, different players, but one guy was coming off a very productive college career, and we thought, oh, Charbonnet goes here, he goes there, he goes, oh crap, he went to the Seahawks. You know, like if Corum goes here, you know, and maybe he has an opportunity, he may do nothing to Kyren Williams, absolutely nothing to him, you know, to impact him in a tremendously negative way. It may just be like
the way I'm leaning. I don't know. I don't want, you kind of made it sound like I said that Corum will impact.
No. I was agreeing with you. You know.
Oh, okay. I don't know
but
if
he was talking about outcomes. Of course, there's a chance that it could go to either side of the pendulum. There's a chance Blake Corum could be the best running back in LA from early season on.
Look,
there's a chance Blake Corum could matter not at all.
He was taking like 80 spots ahead of where Kyren Williams was taken. So it's possible he's just a better running back. I do think you have to have your antenna up there. Like what Kyren Williams did last year was very surprising.
Is it Dameon Pierce? Is it James Robinson? Is it those type of guys, Isaiah Pacheco? But he's brought up a good point when we talk about those guys. The coaching staff didn't change.
So from my standpoint, when I get worried is if I don't have faith in the incumbent running back. If I do have faith in them, then I don't think a third round pick is probably going to have much of an effect on the guy. I guess that'd be my easiest way to sum it up.
I'll say this for those running backs that have been getting drafted later. I don't think we can value day 3 running backs the same way we have in the past, because the NFL has changed. We only saw 4 running backs actually get 20 touches per game last year on average. That's the lowest in the NFL in forever. So I know there's been a lot of hyperbole that the NFL is changing and running backs don't matter, but we are kind of seeing that come to fruition. We are starting to see a bit more of these committee backfields.
All right. Let's talk about the rookie only Superflex mock. After one more rankings follower for you. It's Deebo Samuel down 5 spots. Is that a Ricky Pearsall reaction?
Yeah, it's a Ricky Pearsall reaction. I was very high on Ricky Pearsall. I was on with JJ Zacharyson, and we were talking about Ricky Pearsall and Ladd McConkey and those scrappy gym rat slot receiver types. And I sat there and I said, you know, the more film I start to watch, I liked Ladd, but the more film I start to watch, I think Ricky Pearsall does everything that Ladd McConkey does, but even better. And now he gets onto a really good offense. Deebo Samuel does tend to miss time here and there. And back to the Venn diagram, there's a little bit of what Ricky Pearsall can do in terms of underneath work, in terms of actually, he got used a lot in the rushing game at Florida. I love that he's got versatility throughout various schemes, 3 different quarterbacks throughout his college career. There's just a really good shot for Ricky Pearsall to hit the ground running and be on the field in these 3 wide receiver sets. And it doesn't necessarily kill Deebo Samuel. A little bit is Deebo Samuel moving down because of Pearsall, and then others is, you know, wide receivers moving up because their team didn't draft wide receivers to hurt their value.
Okay. I'm looking at some fun Venn diagrams right now, trying to find my favorites. This one I can't.
Oh, good. You're paying attention to
I can't. Yeah, Deebo Samuel, Ricky Pearsall. I can't say this one on the air, but I will say this about Ricky Pearsall. A lot of the people in the industry, including Alfredo, that I think are great at what they do and really respect them, they were higher on Ricky Pearsall than what the consensus draft rankings may have been. And then you see the 49ers draft him in the first round. It's pretty exciting stuff.
That surprised me, the first round draft capital. I thought he'd be a second round pick for sure. I had to change our thumbnail and everything for our day 2 YouTube live stream because he was on there.
It's annoying. It's annoying to change it. You got Schaefer. That's not a fun thing to do. All right, let's get to that rookie only Superflex mock draft and see how it went and get Alfredo's reaction to it here. It was 3 rounds, PPR, and it was a non-snake draft. And again, it was Superflex. And how about Caleb Williams going number 1, Marvin Harrison number 2? Now, these are not real teams, so we don't know what the team needs were or anything. This is just the mock draft. Caleb, Marvin Harrison, Jaden Daniels. It gets pretty interesting after that. I mean, do you go with Neighbors or Odunze, or do you go with what RJ White did with the 4th pick, Dave? He took JJ McCarthy. Again, it is super flex, but I would call him a riskier prospect than Neighbors and Odunze. It went McCarthy, then Odunze, then Malik Neighbors. Those were the first 6 picks. Do you think McCarthy was the right choice after Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Jaden Daniels?
It's going to come down to need, obviously, in these super flex drafts, these rookie-only drafts that we're talking about. I think in a vacuum, I'm taking Neighbors. But I get it with McCarthy. I love the landing spot for McCarthy, and I think he could end up being very good for fantasy in Minnesota throwing to those receivers.
As I told you, I think, Adam, on our last show, I'm in a rookie-only draft, super flex. I had the 5th pick, and it went Williams, Daniels, Harrison, Neighbors, McCarthy for me.
Before Odunze.
You needed the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I have Stafford and Geno Smith in a super flex league. Like, quarterback was a priority.
So what was I going to say? So what about the idea, though, Jamie, that, like, did you put this thought into it? Well, Odunze is just a better prospect. I like him better. I will draft him and then try to trade for a quarterback.
So I also had the 12th pick, and I thought maybe play out the scenario of, and it would have worked out, of taking Odunze and then Bo Nix. And so I could have had that pairing. Instead, I ended up with McCarthy and McConkey, and I like that better. You know, just if McCarthy hits, and clearly there's, you know, wide range of you know, speculation on what kind of a player he is, prospect he is. The landing spot is undeniable, you know, that he ended up in arguably the best spot for any of the rookie quarterbacks, and you could debate the Bears. But, you know, if he hits and is Kirk Cousins, you know, that's a starting fantasy quarterback in a super flex league that feels safer to me than Bo Nix. And McConkey, while he's not Odunze, is certainly a starting caliber fantasy option. In this league, we start 5 receivers. So I like the way that it worked out better for me. And, you know, as I told you, I was either going to go Neighbors or McCarthy, depending on how those 2 guys were selected. And I feel better actually about ending up with McCarthy in this format.
Alfredo, what are your thoughts here? Because I actually think there's another angle to this, is McCarthy being the 3rd quarterback. Well, I mean, I'm not so sure that that shouldn't be Drake May. You know, I understand the landing spot makes a huge difference, but May was picked 3rd. And then you see these post-draft reports that the Giants were willing to give up a lot to move up to get Drake May. And the Vikings, I believe, were going to give up their 2 first-round picks and a 2025 first-round pick. At least that was the report, to get Drake May. Then they end up getting JJ McCarthy. So how do you see, again, this draft went Caleb, Marvin Harrison, Jaden Daniels, and then it got kind of interesting. What would you have done there with the 4th pick?
If I'm at the 4th pick, once again, it depends on the team build out there. I'm probably going with one of the receivers, Odunze or Neighbors, but I'm taking Drake May over JJ McCarthy. I had him there pre-draft. I still have him there, but now they're neck and neck. The thing was, I just had JJ McCarthy a bit lower. I get it. Drake May ended up in a bad landing spot, but everything that you just said, Adam, shows us how the NFL valued him. And I already valued him high, and that was kind of validating. It was vindicating to hear that that's what these teams wanted. It's going to be a process. It's going to be a process for both these guys. I think that a lot of people look at the landing spot for JJ McCarthy and think he can hit the ground running. There's not really a guarantee that Sam Darnold doesn't start the first half of the season. And JJ McCarthy still has a lot of developing to do. I think it was 2022 where he had less pass attempts than Drake May had pass completions. So I know there's much to do about Drake May not having experience and only starting 2 years. He's 21 years old. He's going to develop. JJ McCarthy, he needs more experience as well. He needs to be passing the ball quite a bit more as well. What I do obviously get is there's a big advantage for him with KOC and what they were able to do with Josh Dobbs and all these other backup quarterbacks in Minnesota. So I wouldn't fault anyone for taking McCarthy over May. I prefer May for the long term because I think there's a higher ceiling there because that environment, that ecosystem around him can change. But there's a lot of Josh Allen to what Drake May does.
Jonathan Brooks went 7th overall in this draft after 3 wide receivers and 3 quarterbacks. Then Drake May went 8th and Brock Bowers went 9th. Alfredo, first to you. Jonathan Brooks, look, 7th is kind of late for the first running back off the board, but he was a late pick in terms of the first running back off the board of the NFL draft. Do you think he belongs in that group there with Bowers and May?
Yes, but at the end of it, I'd probably put him around 10 or 11, and you can make your choice on Jonathan Brooks or Xavier Worthy, which I'd probably go Worthy and Brian Thomas over Brooks. I really like Jonathan Brooks. I really do. For Dynasty, though, I am going to value wide receivers just a little bit more.
Okay. It is funny, this draft that I'm looking at, the results are almost identical. So it was, and this is with other people in the industry. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, JJ McCarthy, Odunze 6, Brooks 7, Bowers 8, May 9, Worthy 10, Brian Thomas 11, and Ladd McConkey 12.
Okay, so that brings us to 10, 11, and 12 in this draft because the first 9 were Caleb, Harrison, Daniels, McCarthy, Odunze, Neighbors, Brooks, Drake May, Brock Bowers, Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas. So those guys rounded out. And then in the second round, after Worthy, McConkey, Thomas, we have Keon Coleman, Bo Nix, Ricky Pearsall. You're getting all the guys who were top 35 picks in the NFL draft. Trey Benson is the second running back off the board. Then Michael Penix, and then Xavier Legette. You want to stop there, Dave? We got Benson, Penix, Legette in the middle, early to mid second round.
I mean, you ran off a ton of names. The first thing that stands out between our Superflex mock and Jamie's draft is that there seems to be a consensus top 12, and that's good. So lots of receivers in there, 1 running back in there, 4 quarterbacks in there for a Superflex. I think that's something that fantasy managers who are going to be doing rookie-only Superflex drafts of their own can go ahead and feel good about. As for round 2, I think these are a lot of the names that are going to be at the top of round 2 in a 12-team rookie-only Superflex. And it's almost like you choose which flavor of ice cream you like. There's a lot to love about all the guys that you named, except Penix. I don't know how much there is to love about him, because if you're taking him with an early second-round pick, you're basically saying, okay, this is a pick that I'm just shoving away into the future. I don't like doing that with an early second-round pick in a rookie-only draft when there's other solid talent on the board, and a lot of that talent did go ahead of Penix in ours, but I think some guys that went after Penix deserve to be going ahead of him as well, simply because you just have to wait a long time for Penix, and there's no guarantee that Penix is going to work out as a great fantasy quarterback down the line.
It is interesting if you pick in the beginning part of it, and if you anticipate Bo Nix being there in round 2. Like, you can't ask for a better start, in my opinion, if you get Harrison and Nix. Maybe you could say Caleb Williams and Keon Coleman. That's a pretty good option as well. But like, if you're in the Bo Nix camp and you're not sold so much on Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels, and you have the first pick, Marvin Harrison's going to be a superstar.
All right, what do you like better, Jamie? Williams and Coleman, or
in this format? I like Williams and Coleman better, but it's not bad to say you're going to go Harrison and Nix. Just I'm not the biggest Bo Nix guy, but to end up with Harrison and Nix, especially if you have, like in my situation where you need both, so you never have too many receivers and you need a quarterback, so if you want to take one of those quarterbacks, especially if you're picking 2 or 3, if you end up with Harrison, you may end up still with Bo Nix. That's pretty good.
Yep.
Trey Benson went with the 4th pick of round 2. Jalen Wright went with the 7th pick of round 2. There are only 3 running backs, Brooks, Benson, and Wright, Alfredo. Only 3 running backs taken in the first 23 picks. Blake Corum went 24th overall. But when you look at this, do you think that these running backs should have gone higher? Do you think this is okay? Your thoughts?
I think it's okay. Like I said, I do tend to lean a little bit more towards wide receiver value in Dynasty, especially because of like what we talked about throughout this show is that we don't know how much these guys are actually going to play as rookies. And then once they get to their second year, if they didn't get a lot of snaps, it's really hard to start getting these guys onto the field, where I think there's some really good path to relevance for guys like Roman Wilson going to the Steelers. I absolutely love that. He's Deontay Johnson, but he blocks. A.D. Mitchell can be a lot of fun for the Colts. You never want injury, but if something were to happen to Michael Pittman, the Colts really showed they wanted A.D. Mitchell. So he's another guy. And then we kind of touched on Jermaine Burton a little bit earlier as a guy that could turn into something for the Bengals if T. Higgins leaves. So, I would probably be taking a lot of those wide receivers. I'm looking at my rookie rankings, and I think in that second round, I'm taking most of those receivers over. So I've got Roman Wilson and AD Mitchell over Trey Benson. And then right after Blake Corum, I've got Jermaine Burton and Malachi Corley. But I'm not taking Jalen Wright or Marshawn Lloyd in that second round.
We got Joey Wright from Football Guys in the chat today, and he says, the gentleman who took Williams and Keon Coleman is kind, smart, and handsome. And that, of course, was him.
Daily affirmations.
I think Jamie, if you could just put me behind Zach Brook in every draft, that'd be great. Because he took a Doomsday, I took Neighbors. He took Penix, I took Legette. He took Estime, I took Marshawn Lloyd. I don't understand that. I don't understand Bucky Irving or Estime going ahead of Marshawn Lloyd. That was, I thought, I got lucky there.
Yep.
But last thing, we could talk. You'll see the result. If you want to see this, we got articles about it on the website. You can see the results. But
we actually have 3 rookie-only mock drafts. I did 2 of them. Heath did 1. So I did the Superflex one that you're seeing here, a 1 quarterback one, which we also did. You referenced that, Adam, at the same time. And then Heath did a tight end premium one also. So that one's already on the site, and these 2 will be up by the end of the day.
Javon Baker and Jalen Polk going back-to-back in the 3rd round. Dave, Baker went just ahead of Polk. These are both Patriots guys. Polk going 2 rounds ahead of Baker in the real draft. Baker going 1 pick ahead of Polk in this draft. Who do you prefer?
I prefer Polk. I think he's got the better chance to stay on the roster in a meaningful role for a longer period of time. There's upside with Baker too. He's more of the physical, rangy type of wideout that you'll use on the perimeter. I think Polk can do it all. I think he can play anywhere across the field. He's not necessarily elite in any one category, but someone who can just be a good contributor for the Patriots over the balance of his career. He's someone I'm targeting with that late 2nd or early 3rd round and rookie only.
And this is, to go back to Alfredo's point about Drake May, about the ecosystem changing. You see what the Patriots are doing. They went out and they were very aggressive in putting weapons around May. They may not be established guys, but, if one of these guys, let's say it's, Douglas and Baker, from a year ago, or even Tyquan Thornton, who now has, better offensive system and a quarterback that may be able to get him the ball, so if 2 of their young receivers are just competent, that could be a 2 and a 3 on a team. They follow the Bills path. They follow the Dolphins path. They go out and they just spend significant capital, draft picks, money, whatever it takes to go get an alpha. And a year from now, we're saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe I took JJ McCarthy over Drake May." That's the type of scenario that can easily change. It's similar to what we're talking about with Bryce Young. He had nothing last year, and they go and they get Deontay Johnson. They draft Xavier Legette. They bring in a running back who can catch passes. They upgrade the offensive line. They bring in a different play caller. Everything changed for him, and so everything could change for Drake May too. So it's certainly, if you're in the Drake May camp, don't give up hope if he has a struggling rookie campaign.
Alfredo, thank you so much for coming on our show.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This was fun.
And where should
diagrams?
Yeah. Where should we be looking for your content?
Well, you can always follow me over on Twitter, or I'm not going to call it X, but at the Pretend GM. And then we are actually moving into a brand new YouTube channel right now, youtube.com/Football Guys Fantasy, where you're going to catch myself, Dave Kluge, Jagger May, Joey Wright, a bunch of our guys just doing fantasy talk there, and leaving our old channel for the Audible, the established guys, Sigmund Bloom, Cecil Lammy, all them. And we have a Dynasty channel as well, so you can check all that out.
Nice. We're neighbors now on YouTube.
Do you need a moving truck for that?
No, we'll be okay. We have a little dolly that Joey pushes around.
Yeah, but Joey always carries a dolly with him.
Yes, 100%. Whether we're moving or not.
We could definitely make a Venn diagram of fantasy football today and Football Guys. There's a lot of things that
it's just going to be a picture of Joey dressed up as the start, sits, and salutations, Joey. That's right in the middle.
Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow reviewing a mock draft with the rookies. See you then.